Hi everyone, and welcome back to Anna and Sigmund Present, where we examine the lives and crimes of notorious killers from around the world. Some you may have heard of, others will be new to you. Either way, we'll be delving into dark and disturbing worlds not for the faint of heart. On March 19th, 1999, 22-year-old Cynthia Vigil was working as a sex worker in a parking lot in Albuquerque, New Mexico, when a man claiming to be an undercover cop told her she was under arrest for solicitation of sex work and put her in the back of his car. "He told me I was under arrest and he put handcuffs on me," said Vigil. The man brought Vigil to his nearby soundproof trailer, which he called his toy box, where she spent 3 harrowing days chained to an obstetric table. This is the story of David Ray, the toy box killer. Born in 1939, David Parker Ray and his sister Peggy were primarily raised by their grandparents, who were believed to have run a strict religious household. Along with suffering abuse at the hands of his father, Ray was bullied at school, mostly it seems because of his shyness around girls. Ray began to develop a secret fascination with sadomasochism. Ray's first foray into sadomasochism allegedly manifested in the mid-1950s, when he was just a teenager. He fantasized about rape, torture, and murder, and would collect pictures of women in bondage. He also made many sadomasochistic drawings, which were discovered by his sister. As the siblings grew up in a tiny rural town, Peggy became a popular, outgoing girl, while Ray remained shy and somewhat of a loner. Although he didn't have many friends at school and spent lots of time on his own, Ray wasn't considered a troublemaker, but showed signs of weird behavior in childhood. From an early age, he's believed to have taken an interest in pornography and violence, which he hid from those around him. It is also reported that Ray developed a fetish for broken bottles, keeping a stash of them in a dungeon he built in the woods when he was 15. Had a social worker or school psychologist seen evidence of a disturbed mind in David Ray, someone might have made a note or started a file, and then who knows what could have been prevented. Nevertheless, after receiving adolescence, he lived a seemingly normal life and joined the U.S. Army, receiving an honorable discharge at the end of his enlistment. Ray told his first wife, Peggy, that it was around the age of 15 when he kidnapped a woman, tied her to a tree, and tortured and murdered her. It must be noted that authorities have not verified his account. In an interview, Peggy revealed that she had been aware of Ray's fantasies and fetishes, but that she did not know the extent. Indeed, it seems Ray engaged in sadomasochistic relationships with prostitutes, unbeknownst to his wife. Over the years, Ray married several times and fathered lots of children, but he abandoned his families and only really bonded with one of his daughters, Glenda Jean Ray. Described as a daddy's girl, Glenda Jean idolized her father, and the pair were incredibly close as she got older. Their bond was even more unusual, given that Ray had abandoned Glenda Jean, her mother, and her siblings when they were young to live on the road, where he eventually became a hippie. However, just a few years later, he returned to Glenda Jean's mom, who took him back. As Ray's beloved daughter developed into an adult, she was tall, slim, and blonde, looking much like a younger version of her dad. She also changed her name several times, going by Jessie to most people she knew. The relationship between Ray and Jessie's mom lasted another decade before he moved on to other women, including Cindy Hendy, who eventually became his accomplice. Jessie Ray was 32 in 1999 when law enforcement arrested her and her father. Reportedly, she had tried to warn the FBI about what he was up to back in 1986. FBI agent Doug Belden recalled Jessie Ray's claim as follows, quote, "She alleged that David Parker Ray was abducting and torturing women and selling them to buyers in Mexico," end quote. The allegations were so nonspecific that the FBI couldn't act against Ray. Okay, that doesn't make much sense to me either. I could only find one source for that bit of info, so take from it what you will. Prior to their arrests, the Albuquerque Police Department has suspected Ray and his daughter in the 1995 disappearance of Jessie Ray's former girlfriend, 22-year-old Jill Troya. Ray lived in Elephant Butte, a small New Mexico town of 1,400 people, and within close proximity of the state park and lake. He He had access to miles of abandoned land, as well as the reservoir, where police propose he could have dumped his victims' bodies without any witnesses. Ray used the remote location of Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, to set up a cargo trailer he then refurbished into a steel-lined torture chamber. The resort town, located approximately 5 miles from Elephant Butte, contained a few local dive bars, which Ray frequented for victims. To create his trailer, Ray allegedly spent upwards of $100,000 on torture devices and tools. Reportedly, Ray constructed elaborate contraptions to confine his victims, such as a fur-lined coffin and a makeshift pillory. He also crafted devices to electrocute his victims and others to hold them in place. In addition to medical instruments and sex toys, Ray's box contained elaborate locks and pulleys to prevent his captives from escaping. Criminal profilers recognize how serial killers work in patterns. Jeffrey Dahmer, for example, picked up his victims at a specific gay bar in the Twin Cities. John Wayne Gacy picked up teens at the bus stop, and David Parker Ray picked up women at the Blue Water Saloon. The saloon was a dive bar that catered to drifters and the few locals that lived around Elephant Butte. One of Ray's few living victims, Kelly Garrett, testified that Ray's daughter, Jessie, drugged her while she was drinking at the saloon. And Marie Parker, ex-girlfriend of Ray's accomplice Dennis Roy Yancey, was also last seen at Blue Waters. Okay, let's get back to Cynthia Vigil's part of the story. We last knew that she had been brought to the toy box after Ray had arrested her whilst pretending to be a police officer. He then chained her to an obstetric-type table in the center of the trailer, and over the next 3 days, raped and tortured Vigil, with help from his girlfriend and accomplice, Cynthia Hendy. The two of them used whips and medical instruments, electric shock, and sexual instruments to torture Vigil. Before her torture, Ray would play a cassette tape with a recording detailing exactly what she would be forced to endure. On the cassette, Ray explained that she was to refer to him only as master, and the woman with him as mistress, and never to speak unless spoken to. He went on to explain exactly how he would rape and torture her. The way he talked, I didn't feel like this was his first time, Vigil said in a later interview. It was like he knew what he was doing. He told me I was never going to see my family again. He told me he would kill me, like the others. On the third day, while Ray was at work, Hendy accidentally left the keys to Vigil's restraints on a table nearby, where she was chained while she left the room. Seizing the opportunity, Vigil lunged for the keys and was able to free her hands. Hendy attempted to stop her, but Vigil stabbed her in the neck with an ice pick when she approached. In desperation, she knocked on the door of a nearby mobile home. The owner of the home brought Vigil in and called the police, who promptly arrested both Ray and Hendy. When local law enforcement found Cynthia Vigil, she was naked except for a dog collar and chain. Ray reportedly treated his victims like dogs, forcing them to eat on the floor while bound with a leash. In Vigil's account of her captivity, she relayed how Ray bathed her like a dog and forced her to perform sexual acts for him and his accomplices. Vigil also recounted how her captor forcefully inserted gravy into her vagina so that a dog would remove the contents against her will. After arresting Ray, the police gained a warrant to search his home and trailer, and what they found shocked and disturbed them. Ray's toy box contained an obstetric table in the middle with a mirror mounted to the ceiling so victims could see the horrors delivered upon them. Littering the floor were whips, chains, pulleys, straps, clamps, leg spreader bars, surgical blades, and saws, as well as numerous sex toys. There was a wooden contraption used to bend over and immobilize Ray's victims while he and his friends would rape them. On the walls were detailed diagrams showing different methods and techniques for inflicting pain. In the trailer of the toy box killer, the police also discovered a videotape from 1996 showing a terrified woman being raped and tortured by Ray and his girlfriend. As the publicity surrounding the case spread, another woman came forward with a similar story. Angelica Montano was an acquaintance of Ray's who, after visiting his house to borrow cake mix, had been drugged, raped, and tortured by Ray before being left by a highway out in the desert. There she was found by police, but there had been no follow-up on her case. Ray would often use drugs that would induce amnesia and memory loss in his victims, like sodium pentothal and phenobarbital, so they could not properly remember what had happened to them. With this stronger case, and with 2 victims testifying to the crimes, the police were able to press Hendy, who quickly folded and began telling what she knew of the murders. Her testimony led the police to discover that Ray had been helped in the abductions and murders by his daughter, Jessie, and friend, Dennis Roy Yancey. Yancey admitted to participating in the murder of Marie Parker, a woman who was abducted, drugged, and tortured for days by Ray and his daughter before Yancey strangled her to death in 1997. After releasing some details about the women in the video, she was identified by her ex-mother-in-law as Kelly Garrett, a former friend of Ray's daughter. On the 24th of July, 1996, Garrett, after getting into a fight with her then-husband, decided to spend the night playing pool at a local saloon with Jessie. Jessie roofied Garrett's beer, and she and her father placed a dog collar and leash on her and brought her to his trailer. He then raped and tortured her for 2 days, keeping her on date rape drugs the entire time. After these 2 days, Ray slit her throat and dumped her on the side of the road. Miraculously, Garrett survived the encounter, but no one, neither her husband nor police, believed the story. In fact, her husband believed she had cheated on him that night and filed for divorce that year. Due to the effects of the drugs, Garrett had limited recollection of the events over those 2 days, but remembered being raped by the toy box killer. These drugs, as well as the socioeconomic standing of many of the women involved, made it difficult for their testimony to be readily accepted by jurors. Though he was able to beat 2 of the cases against him, the toy box killer was ultimately sentenced to 224 years in prison for numerous offenses involved in the abduction and sexual torture of these 3 women. Jessie Ray received a sentence of 9 years, and Cindy Hendy was given 36 years in prison. David Parker Ray died of a heart attack on May 28, 2002, a mere 3 years into his sentence. So, how many more victims are there? In their investigation of David Parker Ray's trailer, people found evidence of several more killings, including diaries written by Ray, where he detailed the murder of at least 50 other women. Despite the evidence, the authorities were unable to create cases from them. Though Hendy and Yancey both identified areas they believed Ray disposed of bodies, police found no human remains in any of these locations. It is believed that a serial killer who put this amount of effort into his horrifying toy box and who killed numerous women over many years would likely have had a greater number of victims. The many unidentified personal effects and jewelry found in his trailer also point to a greater number of victims for the toy box killer. We're still getting good leads, FBI spokesman Frank Fisher said about the toy box killer in 2011. As long as we're getting those leads, and as long as the exposure in the press keeps generating interest in the case, we're going to keep investigating this. Thanks for watching. We hope you found this to be both entertaining and informative. If you have any suggestions for topics, please let us know in the comments down below. We'll do our best to accommodate your wishes. Don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification button. It's just a few clicks for you, but it means a lot for us. You can also help the channel by becoming a patron. Click the link in the description if this is a way you can support us. Any help you give our channel is greatly appreciated. See you next time.